Hey guys, in this video we're going to build a boat anchor. I mean a 307 Chevy. It's kind of the same thing, right? And then you want to put the cam in, try not to nick any of the cam bearings or not. And there. So you want to very carefully set it down in there and let it sit in 2 steps. So I'm going to go to 40 first, and you can watch it. The crank. All right. Much content to put on there. There we go. Deal. Turn it a little bit. Wall. Try not to move my gaskets. Okay guys, so the 307 is put together and ready to run. Well, not really ready to run, but it's close. It needs a carburetor, water pump, whatever, you know. Now, I'm building a test stand to put this engine on. I'm going to crank it up. I'm going to break in the cam, set the timing and all that on there, make sure I don't have any drastic oil leaks or big holes in the side of it or something like that before I put it in a car. Okay, so normally you'd buy an engine test stand or you would go ahead and just build one out of some metal. I'm going to go in between. I have a spare subframe that came with the car I bought recently that already had legs welded onto it as kind of a, I don't know if he used it for a test stand or if he just used it as a cradle to hold the engine so he can roll it around the shop. Either way, I've got something to hold the engine. It's perfect. It's an old subframe. Now, I had a lot of things around the shop to use. I did have to buy a few things. Had to buy electric fuel pump. Had to buy a couple of gaskets, some things like that. I didn't have to buy a whole lot of stuff. I had most of it. I'm going to rob the carburetor and distributor off of Frank & Nova because I've got different ones going on there. A little bit better for the situation. Anyway, let's get started. Okay, so I picked this up with one of the cars I bought here recently, and you know, I got it with the car because the 69 I bought did not have a subframe. I needed one, so I was like, hey man, do you have any subframes laying around? He had this one that he had used for some type of engine stand. So it's got some casters and some legs welded to it. Now, I'm going to use this in the car that I'm building, so I'm going to need to cut these off at some point. But for now, it's going to make a perfect test stand. It's going to take a lot of the work out of building a test stand. I don't really use a test stand that often. I've never used one before. I'm going to throw this one together. Now, as far as I've got the stands to put on the frame, I'm going to put those on there. And then to hold up the back of the engine, I'm going to use an old transmission case with no torque converter or anything in it. It doesn't have an input shaft in it. So I'm going to bolt that to the back of the transmission. The transmission mount will go on the back and hold up everything just like a car would. My headers are going to fit. It should be really easy. Okay, so the first thing we are going to do is get ready to get the engine set down in here. Now this thing is not perfectly clean. It's been sitting outside. It got rained on. Got a little dust thrown up on it. But anyway, we're going to work with it. Now I've got my frame stands here, and I don't know if these are, I know they're factory, but I don't know if they're big block, small block, 6-cylinder. I don't know what they are, but hopefully they work. We'll find out shortly. Okay, so whether you're running a mechanical fuel pump or not, this hole right here, and I've shown you this in other videos, this goes to your fuel pump push rod that's driven by the cam. Even if you use this block off plate that I had kind of hacked on here just because I didn't have what I needed and I'm trying to make this stuff work. Anyway, this hole is open to that hole, and it's made to put a bolt in there to hold the rod up while you put the fuel pump on, and then you take the bolt back out. That's an oil leak waiting to happen if you don't seal it, regardless of whether you're using a fuel pump or not. So I always take a really short 3/8 bolt, put it in there, tighten it up with a little bit of sealer on there. It's not going to leak. And the reason I always use a short bolt is just so that I don't accidentally get in the habit of putting a long bolt in it and then put a fuel pump rod in there, tighten it down and mess the rod up. Can't get it back out, and it becomes a big bunch of drama. Ask me how I know. All right, next is my oil filter adapter. Make sure it's as clean as you can get it. Okay, so apparently my frame stands that I used are factory big block pieces, because I know they're factory, they're not reproduction, and this one was much shorter. They might be 6-cylinder, but I don't think the 6 cylinders were short on one side. I didn't have any other ones available that I had access to today, so I went ahead and just spaced them up with a bunch of washers. I wouldn't do that on a car that I'm driving around, but for a test stand, it's going to work out fine. Okay, engine and transmission case are sitting here. I've got it held up. I had to space my engine mount up on the other side. You saw that. Now, I got to make sure that my spark plugs are tight enough, and I'm going to put the oil filter on this side, put the starter on the other side. Then I can hang my headers on it, and I can start putting the radiator support, the radiator, and all the wiring in. And sorry about the frogs. It's pouring down rain, and the frogs are loving it, and it's really loud. So I don't know how much the mic's picking up, but it sounds like it's in my pocket. Let's get started. Okay, so my jag starter does not fit. It hits the flywheel. That's twice I've tried to use that starter, and I don't think it's for the small flywheel. I guess it could be, but either way, I'm going to pick up another starter tomorrow. So tonight I'm going to finish putting the rest of this together as much as I can, and I'll put the passenger side header and starter on. Probably be the last couple things I do, other than priming it and putting the distributor in. Okay, so I got this mounted up here with a couple of bushings. It's not the right bushings, but it'll work for now. Okay, I got the radiator support mounted in. I did not use the correct bushings for the radiator support, but I got some bushings in there, so it's not completely solid mounted. Anyway, it's not going anywhere. The radiator, I got this on Amazon. This is a factory replacement, all aluminum, 3-core radiator. It comes with a radiator cap. I'm not sure about the pound rating, but it comes with a radiator cap. It comes with a transmission cooler built in if you need that. It comes with a drain plug. It seems to fit okay. I'll know in a minute when I get it in there and get the hoses hooked up. But this is an incredible deal. This is just barely over $100, like 115 bucks. The price may change. I don't know when you're seeing this, but wow. I'm going to put a link in the description for this exact radiator or this exact part number. So if you need one for yours. Now, I haven't tested it. I haven't ran it. It's a little bit crude in its design. It doesn't look completely factory, but if you want a good aluminum radiator, I hope good, to replace your factory one, this is a pretty good option as long as it works. Anyway, now the fan that I'm going to be using is this OEM electric fan that fits almost perfectly on this radiator. The problem is I have no idea what this is off of. I've had it for a few years. My buddy gave it to me, and I wish I knew what it was off of because it fits really well. I tested it. It moves a ton of air, so I think it'll be okay. The part number on here is 2206-8205. So if you can look it up, and it looks like this. At first I thought it was a PT Cruiser fan, but those have ears on them. These are a little bit different. It seems like it's going to work really well for this application. Let's hope between the radiator and this, I don't have any problems keeping it cool. Let's get these installed. Okay, so I found an old chrome radiator cover, support, whatever you want to call it. I do not have the rubber mounts that go on top of the radiator. I can't find any. Everything I've got has been modified or whatever. So I thought I had some old ones laying around, but I don't. I've got some on the bottom, just not on the top. Now, this radiator is a little bit different, and since on the factory radiator, the little rubber piece grabs the edge of the tank and holds the radiator back, and this clamps all that down. What I did was, on these front brackets, I put a bolt in here to push against this support that's on the top of this radiator that'll push back on it, and I've made these adjustable to where they'll push all the way against it, hold it against here when the bolt holes are in here. So now we're going to see if my adjustment worked, and bolt this thing in place. It can still go a little farther, but as long as I'm off of the fan whenever it's tight, it'll be fine. Okay, so I got the support on. I ended up taking the nuts I had on the front side, spacing it out, but the full length of this was enough to keep it in there tight. And I've got a little bit of room right here, so should be okay. Okay, got my radiator and fan installed. Got my old upper cover on. It's holding everything in place. Now I'm going to put the lower radiator hose on and the upper radiator hose. Now, the upper radiator hose is a stock Nova upper radiator hose. They did not have one in stock for the lower hose, so I bought one that was close and cut it and made it fit. The diameter is a little bit large on the radiator nipple side, but I'm going to clamp it a little bit tighter, and it'll be fine. The water pump side is just right. Okay, I was able to throw this together. I've got a fuse block on here, starter solenoid, my battery's going to go at the bottom. I've got my boat fuel tank there. I've got an electric fuel pump on the side of the frame rail. I've got an old tack I had laying around, kind of just sitting in here. Got some new oil pressure and water temperature gauges, and then I've got a brand new switch panel that I got from Summit. So I've got to wire all this up, and then I'm going to throw the carburetor on, prime it, put the distributor in, put the plug wires on, and we can make some noise. Okay, so I've got my Summit Racing switch panel here. Got one I'm going to use for ignition. The rest of them are going to be fan and fuel pump, and maybe the lights for the gauges or something else if I feel like wiring that up. I've got an old, really old auto gauge tack that's kind of just sitting in here, but you know, it's not going anywhere. Oil pressure gauge, water temperature, both mechanical. I've got this sitting here, and then I've got my fuse block, and I've got my starter solenoid, and the fuse block has lights on it, so if the fuse blows, it makes the circuit and lights up. And then I've got an Edelbrock low pressure electric fuel pump here on the rail. I've already got my negative cable hooked up, so I can move that wherever, and then I'll have to hook a cable from there on the starter solenoid over to my solenoid on my control panel. Okay, I got my control panel wired up. I've got it hooked up to the engine. Now it's a little bit sloppy, but this thing's not going to move, hopefully. Not much anyway, right? So it's going to be fine. I'm going to zip tie some stuff out of the way to make sure it doesn't get caught in the fan belt, but we're good to go. I've got a fuse block here that's protecting all my little small circuits. I've got a circuit breaker here that goes through a relay to go to my fan because it's the highest current draw that I've got. I didn't want to run it through a 30 amp fuse. I don't think it was really enough. So I've got a little 50 amp circuit breaker powering up that. The fuse does power the switch that goes to the relay though. So if the switch melts down, it doesn't set any wires on fire. Now I've got my solenoid here. That goes around to the starter. I've got a regular GM starter, and I just jumped the start terminal to the main terminal. So as soon as you energize this, all of that's going to start turning, and you let go of this. So anyway, we're going to get the carburetor on here. It is the 750 that I had on Franken-Nova. It's a vacuum secondary carburetor. Too big for a 307, especially for a street motor really, but it'll work fine for breaking in the cam and checking for leaks and all that kind of stuff. And then if we get that done, I'm going to prime the oil pump, and then we're going to put some spark plug wires on here and make this thing make some noise. Okay, distributor's in, carburetor's on, fuel system's hooked up, my gauges are hooked up. Now what I'm going to do is, I've already primed the oil, I primed the fuel system, made sure there's no leaks on the fuel system, and now we're ready to test fire this thing. Now, I've got a video, I'll put it at the top here, where shows you how to time a distributor and get it right the first time. I'm pretty consistent about getting one to start up right away. Getting my number one where I need it to be, having the timing close enough for it to start first try. I've already got fuel in the bowl because I got an electric pump on here. I pumped it a few times. I think everything's clear. I spun it over to make sure the starter was going to work. So let's turn the ignition on. I'm not going to turn the fan on yet, and I'm not going to turn the fuel pump on yet because the bowl is full, and that's enough to run it for just a few seconds. So let's see if it fires up. All right. Let's advance the time in a little bit. Try it again. I think I need more time. And I don't have the choke on, so maybe that's hurting me. There we go. We need more time. Okay, that's too much timing because it was kicking back, or not kicking back, but it's hard to start. Let me figure out what's going on with it because it needs to run, get up to 2,000 RPM and run for a few minutes to break the cam in. I'm not sure why it's not running longer. I may be out of fuel. Okay, found the problem, giant vacuum leak because the vacuum port on the back of the carburetor was not plugged. So, let me see if there's yeah, the other ports are plugged. So this one I had the brakes hooked up when it was on Frankenova. That's why it didn't start. So let's try this again. I'm still going to leave the fuel pump off because that apparently wasn't the problem. All right, that needs more timing. Right. Okay guys, well that's a pretty mean sounding little 307. Now, I only ran it about 15 minutes. I need to run it about 20-25 minutes at around 2,000 RPM. I vary from 1,800 to 2,200, somewhere around there. And the problem was I don't have baffles in these valve covers, and oil was starting to splash out and run onto the headers and smoke up the shop. So I shut it down, plus it's really loud, so I'm gonna get some mufflers. I'm gonna put some mufflers on it. I'm gonna get the different set of valve covers, some baffles in it. I'll finish running it in tonight. And hopefully my neighbors won't freak out now because, like I said, it was really, really loud. I've got good neighbors. I want to keep them happy. So I'm going to put some parts in the description, the rocker arms, the radiator, stuff like that I used on this build. The camshaft, even though that camshaft is really too big for a 307. But so you've been warned. Anyway, subscribe to the channel, please. Give me a like on the video. Give me a comment if you want to know something. I try to answer everyone. So anyway, we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.